Hi everyone, I'm Heather. I am the software trainer for Maxon here in the UK, and today I wanted to show you how you can create an animated text effect similar to this one in Cinema. So to achieve this, I'm going to use the MoGraph matrix object alongside deformers, and this will give us extra control over the spheres, which will allow us to create the kind of twisting and spinning effect you can see here. So let's get straight into it and jump into Cinema. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, first of all, we need a text spline. So go to your spline menu and grab some text. And in your text window, type in the letter or the letters that you'd like to use. In this case, I'm just going to go for the letter S just to keep things simple. I want a font that's slightly thinner, so I'm going to have a quick look and see what we've got here. Ooh, definitely not that. Let's have a look at something else. Maybe this one here. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the name of it. Yep, that looks good. I'm going to change the alignment to middle as well. Brilliant. So that looks fine. Now we need to apply some geometry onto our text. Now you'd probably think let's go for the extrude object. In this case I'm not going to. This is basically because I want more control over where the subdivisions are going to be on our mesh. So for this I'm actually going to create the letter from scratch using this spline as a template. So I'm going to go to the front view and just zoom in a bit. And I'm going to create a polygon. So to do that, I'm going to go to Create, Object, and Empty Polygon. And then I'm going to go over to the polygon mode down the left-hand side. And if I use the right-click menu, anywhere in the viewport, just right-click and it will bring up a menu for us. You have got a Create Polygon tool. This is what's going to allow us to actually draw our polygon. One thing we do need to change is this create drop down. Instead of n-gon, we're going to create quadrangle. We're going to change it to quadrangle strip. This will allow us to create a strip of polygons with 4 points in each polygon. So I'm just going to click and drag just to start drawing it. You do want these polygons to be relatively evenly spaced. It's not the end of the world if it's not, but it's definitely something to bear in mind. I'm going to fast forward through this bit because it's super boring. Okay, so there it is. I just double clicked on that last point there just to say that I've completely finished my mesh. Now what we could do, if you wanted, is edit some of the points here, so you could move some of the points using the move tool if you're not too happy with it. There's also a handy tool in the right click menu called slide, and this will allow you to kind of click and drag on a point and drag it along the same line just to adjust your points slightly. So yeah, that's that. What do we need to do now? We need to make it 3D. So I'm going to jump back into the perspective view and go back to polygon mode. I'm going to delete this text now because we just don't need it anymore, so I'm just going to get that out of the way. And I'm going to use the right click menu and extrude to give it some thickness. So a couple of things I want to change in the extrude attribute manager. I'm going to change the offset to 15. Then I'm going to turn on create caps so we get a solid letter. And then I'm going to increase the subdivision to 1, and I'll show you what that does now if I hit apply. So increasing the subdivision to 1 literally just gives us another line running around the letter here. So that means more points, which means when we come to add the clones onto our letter, it's going to give us more clones because they align to each and every point on our letter. So I'm going to add in just a few more because we want loads of bubbles. So I'm going to grab live selection and select 2 ends, and I'm holding down shift so I can multi-select, and I'm just going to select these polygons around the back as well. Right, so I'm going to put a knife cut through these, basically to cut them in half. So right click to get to your knife tool. And I'm not going to spend forever just cutting through each polygon on their own. I'm going to change the mode to loop. And then when you change the mode to loop, what it will do is it will look at the normals of your mesh, and it will allow you to cut through the middle of each polygon. So if I just align it to kind of where I want, halfway through, and then left click, you'll see that it's given me even more subdivisions, which means even more bubbles, which is brilliant. Okay, so now we've got the mesh sorted. The next thing we need to do is look at our matrix object. So let's grab a matrix object from the MoGraph menu. And you can see here, when we bring in a matrix object, it gives you a load of cubes in kind of a grid array, because that's what the mode is set to. If I render, however, you can see that they don't appear in the render. It's just an indicator as to where they are, kind of a display option if you want. Okay, so instead of having the matrix set to grid array, we want these cubes to be aligned to every subdivision on our mesh. So in order to do that, we need to change the mode. So we want object mode. Now you can see a window has appeared asking us for an object. So what we can do, click and hold down on our polygon in the object manager and drag it down into that window and then release. And now you can see all of our cubes have aligned nicely onto our mesh. Brilliant. But the problem is, we can't see the cube, so we need to give it some geometry. So I'm going to use a sphere. Okay, that's a little large, so I'm going to reduce that down to, what does 7 look like? Maybe 8. Okay, 7 or 8 will do nicely. So how are we going to align these onto the matrix? Well, we're going to use a cloner. Now, I'm going to go to MoGraph, grab a cloner, and make the sphere a child. And by default, if we look at the cloner attribute manager, the mode is set to linear. We want that set to object again. And again, it brings up this window for us. And in this window, I'm going to drag in the matrix object. So now we have a sphere wherever the cube is, and the cube is wherever the subdivisions are on the mesh. So we're lining them up all nicely to our subdivisions that we created when we created our mesh. Okay, so that's the first bit pretty much done when it comes to the matrix object. Now we need to look at deformers to start animating these bubbles. So the first deformer we'll look at is the melt deformer. So I'm just going to go to the deformers menu and grab a melt. Now your melt deformer does need to be a child of the matrix. We can't make it a child of the cloner. I'll try and show you what will happen. Something really odd will happen. You can't really look at anything. This is the reason we're using matrix in the first place. You can't put a deformer on a cloner because it will deform the actual meshes of your spheres and it won't give you the correct result. This is why we're using the matrix deformer alongside the cloner, so we can use deformers with MoGraph. So the melt deformer is on there first. You can see here we've got the strength, we've got it, let me just tweak that. So at 0% the spheres are completely on the letter S, and then at 100% they're completely on the floor. So when they're on the floor, they spread out a little bit too much, especially if you've got kind of a word. You don't really want the spheres kind of interacting too much with each other. So I'm going to reduce the melted size. By default, it's set to 400. If I set that to 150, and you'll see I'm tweaking the animation timeline every now and again just to get it to update for us. So that's giving us a smaller area in which our spheres can melt into. Okay, so we need to animate this, so we want them going from the floor onto our letter. We can do this using the strength parameter. So make sure that your time slider is at 0 and make sure your strength is at 100%. To record the keyframe, look for the grey dot to the left of the word strength and then Control and left click on that dot. You can see it goes block red, and you can also see that a blue kind of square has appeared where your time slider was. This is telling us that we've recorded a keyframe, so that's our indicator. So that's our first keyframe in. Let's move the time slider forward to something like 45. We can tweak these afterwards. So time slider at 45, reduce the strength down to 0 now, and then Control and left click again. So if I scrub through the animation, you can see the transition works quite nicely between the melted and the spheres on the letter. So that's the first bit done, nice and easy. The next deformer we're going to look at is the twist deformer. So again, go to the Deformers menu and grab a twist deformer. You can see that a lilac box has appeared in our viewport. This lilac box needs to be nicely placed over the letter S to get the best results. Now, those of you who are using release 15, like I am, has a great button here called Fit to Parent, which will do that really easily for us. So I'm going to make sure that twist is a child of the matrix. This Fit to Parent will kind of activate then. And then if I just select that, it just snaps onto the parent mesh, which is our matrix. For those of you who are using a slightly earlier version of Cinema, you can do it. You can change the size and the position manually using your size parameters here and also your coordinate tab. Okay, so instead of using a strength, we're going to use an angle in this case. So the angle is set to 0 at the minute. If I increase that, you can see the lilac box starting to spin, and you can see the spheres starting to spin around as well on the floor. I'm going to set that to say 550. So we get a few nice turns. And it's the same thing as before. So make sure that your time slider is at 0 and record the angle to whatever you set it at. So in my case, 550. Control, left click to record a keyframe. Then move forward again to 45. And I'm going to reduce the angle to 0. Control and left click again. So if I scrub through now, okay, it's all right, but a lot of the spinning is done on the floor and then you don't get too much twisting towards the end. So what we need to do is move these keyframes forward. Now, a nice quick way of doing it is by multi-selecting. You can multi-select by clicking and holding down in your timeline, and you can see a grey kind of bar appearing as I drag around. So I'm still holding down. I'm going to drag over the two keyframes, and you can see that they turn orange. This means that they're both selected, so I can click and hold down anywhere in this light grey bar and move the keyframes around at the same time. So I'm going to drag them so the first key frame is at frame 15, I think. And if I play that, okay, it gives us a nicer result, I think. Okay, so the next thing we need to do, we're going to turn our attentions now onto the cloner object, just to get a little bit more interest in our spheres. So with the cloner object selected, we're going to add in an effector. We're going to add in a random effector to randomize the position and the scale of our bubbles. So, with the cloner selected, go to MoGraph effector, and in there you have got random effector. Okay, so you can see that the random effector has gone to work straight away. This is because we had the cloner selected when we brought in the random effector. So the random knew straight away to affect the cloner. It's all a bit crazy at the minute. So I'm going to go to the parameter tab and see what we can do to calm this random effector down a little bit. By default, the random effector has position turned on, and the X, Y, and Z axis is set to 50 centimeters. These measurements here basically are the movement range, so how far these spheres are allowed to move in a certain direction. So the higher the measurement, the more random you're going to get. I'm going to lower the random effect down to around 30. Okay, so they're not as crazy, so that's good. If I press play, yeah, it's looking a bit strange. So these spheres aren't actually animating, so it looks very static at the minute. So what I'd like to do is actually get each individual sphere moving around, giving us slightly more interest. So I'm going to go to the Effector tab of the random, and in here you've got a random mode. The random mode is set to random, which isn't an animated mode. Let's go to the noise mode. Now if I press play, you can see they're kind of they're moving, but they're kind of moving almost in tandem with each other, a little bit like a school of fish. I don't quite know how to describe it, but they're not completely random to each other. This is because we haven't got this index tick box ticked. If I tick it, you can see that the spheres are now moving on their own individual axis rather than following what the one before it was doing. So it gives us a more natural look. Just through personal preference, I'm also going to reduce down the animation speed, so it's going to make our spheres move slightly slower. You could go, I don't know, anywhere between 30 and 50%, and I think it would look okay. I'm going to go for 50. Okay, so that looks good. The next thing we need to do is change the size of our spheres. We want to randomize the scale of our spheres because not all bubbles are the same size. So to do that, yes, we could go to the parameter tab and tick scale and change it to uniform scale and put in 0.5. Yep, that would work. However, because the random is animated, it's actually animating the scale of our bubbles as well. And in real life, that wouldn't really happen. So it's not the end of the world. I'm just going to turn that off, turn scale off. And what we can do is actually add another random effector to this cloner. You can add multiples of any effector to any generator object in MoGraph. So I'm going to make sure that the clone is selected again and then go to MoGraph effector random, just like we did before. And I'm going to change, just to not complicate things, just going to change this to scale so I know what each one's doing. So I may as well change that. One to random position and one to random scale. So this random scale, as it did before, the position is turned on by default, so I just need to turn off the position parameter, and I'm just going to turn on scale. Now you saw me tick this uniform scale tick box, and I'll show you what happens if I don't do it. If we just increase the X, Y, and Z axis to 0.5 centimeters, you can see here that it's actually deforming the mesh. It's pulling them in different directions and scaling them in different directions, so they don't look like bubbles anymore. What uniform scale does is it scales up or down equally on all three axes. So you can see here we've still got our sphere shapes, but they are still scaling for us. Okay, so if I press play now, we are getting really close to the end, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick animation preview. Now this is really handy just to see how your animation's going before you do your final render. Okay, so in your middle clapperboard icon, you've got Make Preview. And in here, you can set how many frames you want, and also you've got an image size here. I want all the frames, so I'm just going to leave that as is. I'm just going to increase the image size just a little bit, and then hit OK. And a loading bar will appear, and this is telling you that it's calculating, and you'll see that your animation pops up pretty soon, actually. So I can play through that now, so I can have a fair idea of how the animation is going to look. Now, I've forgotten to turn off the visibility of my polygon mesh, so we definitely need to do that. What other things do we need to change? I think these bubbles are still quite random towards the end. I don't think we're actually going to see too much of the letter S. It's going to be like a pile of bubbles. So I think we need to reduce the random position a little bit towards the end of our animation. So let's make those changes now. So first of all, let's turn off the visibility for our letter. So find your polygon or your text, and to the right of it you'll see that you've got these visibility dots or traffic lights. These basically control the visibility in the viewport and in the renderer. So it's just a case of left clicking, and if you left click once it will go green, if you left click twice it will go red. So you can see the top one has disappeared in the viewport, so we need to do the same in the bottom one so it will disappear in our render as well. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to do was actually reduce, if I just render a still, that doesn't look like an S. So I want to reduce the randomness of our bubbles a little bit. To do that, I'm going to go to Random Position. And instead of actually doing it through the position parameter, I can just do it through the strength. It's just slightly easier. You've got a slider here that you can reduce, and you can see as I'm reducing the strength, we can animate it from there, nice and easy. Okay, I still want them to be quite random when they're down on the ground, so I'm just going to move my time slider back to the beginning, and I'm going to scrub through and see where I think would be good to reduce the strength. Maybe around frame 35 would be good. So I'm going to set my time slider to frame 35, and I'm going to record the strength at 100%. So our strength is going to be at 100% between frames 0 and 35. After 35, if I move my time slider forward to say, I don't know, the end of the animation, so frame 70, I can say, right, let's reduce it now. So I'll reduce it down to, where are we? Let's say, I don't know, 45, and then control click again. So if I scrub through, you can see if you look at this bar, it's 100, 100, 100. When it hits 35, it will start reducing all the way down to 45 at the end. Okay, so that's the animation done. One last thing I'm going to do, I didn't think I would need to do this, but I'm just going to select my sphere. I'm just going to reduce the radius down to 7 so all the bubbles aren't that big. Okay, so let's finish this off now. Hopefully with the tutorial you would have got this start file here which has a couple of materials in, and you've also got an environment here. In the environment I have got a morph camera which I'm going to look through. Just by clicking that focus box it will turn white and it means that you're looking through it. I've also animated it as well, so you can see I've got an animation here. So this is my camera movement. So if I press play, you can see there's a nice camera move in there. There is also a couple of materials. Now I've included a bubble material. You see it looks very nice in there. Also, just for me, for the time being, I have got this blue material just because it's quicker to render, so I can show you the final result a little bit faster in the preview. But by all means have a play around with this bubble material. It's just something I've edited from the content browser. So let me do a make preview again. Okay, let's play that. Okay, cool. That doesn't look too bad at all. I didn't actually turn on the environment and camera, so I'm just going to unhide that. It was a bit of a schoolgirl error, and let's try that again. Okay, that's better. That gives you a slightly better idea of what we're going for. Okay, so just have a play around with it, have fun, and I'll speak to you soon.